Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you for tuning into one of our talks today. Today, we're so lucky to be joined by the fantastic Andrea Bordeaux to talk all about the Starz series Run the World. And I love the way that you describe how, when you first did your chemistry read with the other core cast members, that there was such an immediate chemistry and connection between all of you. And so then, when you were working by yourself and developing Ella as a character, how did that really help you in terms of that process, just really in having a sense of not just who she was as an individual, but who she was going to be as a character in terms of the relationship dynamics, because that is such a core of what the show is.
Yeah, I mean, I really felt so lucky that it just wasn't that difficult to do because that chemistry was already present from the very first meeting. And one of the things that's really central to their friendship is the longevity of their friendship. Ella, Whitney, and Renee have been friends since childhood, and you get to see a little bit of a flashback of that in episode 106. My therapist says where you see the younger versions of them when they're in, I think they're in middle school or junior high school. And then Sandy, became friends with everyone when they were studying at Spelman together. And so just the fact that we had that immediate chemistry and that immediate connection to each other, it really helped kind of create the environment of us having been friends for a really long time, because we just had this natural sync and flow together that made it so much easier. So I didn't really have to do a whole lot in terms of building that chemistry with them or finding that connection. But I definitely called on, some of my relationships with some of my friends that I've had for several years, and just to kind of bring that sense of comfort and ease, because I think that's where a lot of the connection comes from, like as far as what the viewers see, is they see this sort of just like ease and comfort between the characters on screen, which is of course being portrayed by the actors. And so yeah, it really wasn't that difficult. It's probably one of the easier parts of developing the character.
And you're absolutely correct, because from the very first moment that we see the four of you on screen together, it's not even just about the narrative and the plot points. It's about just the idiosyncrasies of the way that they are together, whether they're out at a bar or whether they're at home. And so, did you find with a lot of even just the nonverbal things, such as the body language that they have with each other and the way that they move together as a group, that that just came very naturally for you all as well?
Yeah, I mean, we're so unique. We're so unique. We're all so different. We all move different ways. I mean, like Brisha, for instance, is probably the most physical of all of us, and she's super flexible. She loves like lifting her legs up in the air, and I'm just a little bit more reserved and like more in. I really embody a lot of stillness, which I think is something that really comes across with Ella. And yeah, we just it was just so easy. And being on set together, it just felt really natural. It just really flowed, and we allow ourselves to just exist in that unique space that each of us embodies.
And you were mentioning the history of this friendship and how many years they've known each other for. And again, that just comes across so strongly. Did you all have conversations about what you imagine their history to be, what their dynamic had been like when they first became friends? Or, kind of again, because there was just that natural dynamic, did you actually find that there was a little bit less of a necessity to do as much of that?
Yeah, I feel like there was definitely less of a necessity to do that, because again, like that the chemistry was just so clear. And when we're on set, we're just having such a great time together. We know a lot about each other's personal lives, and we're always just like chatting and being silly and playful, and really just acting the way that friends do. And we have our group chat off off set that we participate in, and it's called Who Run the World. And so we're always just kind of staying connected and sending gifts and things to each other. And so the fact that we kind of keep that bond going outside of the show, I think, is what really enhances it when we're together on set.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about working with Lee Davenport, who's the creator of the show. And it sounds like Ella, she wrote pieces of herself into all of these characters, but it really sounds like, especially with Ella, that that was kind of the character that she put a little bit more of her own personal experience and characteristics into. And so I was very interested in your collaborative dynamic and relationship with her as you were discussing a lot of elements of who Ella was and really figuring out her voice as a character at the beginning of the whole process of making the show.
What I really love about about Ella in terms of, Lee's envisioning of her is that, Ella McFair is it's like a pseudonym that Lee used to write under. And I think it's really beautiful because it kind of illustrates the fact that Ella is sort of like this secret version of Lee, like her inner voice kind of being personified in this character. And so, we definitely had a few conversations about her history. I mean, she went to Spelman, of course. She's a member of AKA sorority, which Ella isn't a soror, but that played a big role in terms of Lee's concept of sisterhood and even womanhood. And so we had a lot of conversations about that. And ultimately what I did was, of course, I'm bringing a lot of my own flavor and flair to Ella. Like, for instance, Lee never imagined that Ella would be, bald, because she didn't feel like, because of her own experience, she didn't really feel like Ella would have had the confidence to have, pulled off a hairstyle like this. But then I came in and brought my own little tweak to it that allowed her to kind of see Ella in a different way. And what was really beautiful was that when we got to New York in September to begin filming the rest of this series, Lee had written me this really beautiful note where she essentially told me that, Ella is a character that she has, loved for many, many years, and that she's always envisioned Ella as herself, but now I'm Ella. And it was almost like she was like passing the baton to me and giving me permission to fully embody this character and bring my personality to it. And she's been so generous about just kind of letting me play and letting me find Ella's voice for myself. And, there's certain moments that are like so specific for her that she'll come in and say, hey, so this is what happened in the backstory with regard to this scene. Like, for instance, in episode 2, Ella's tryst with Colin, the bartender, that was a real situation that Lee had. And so she kind of gave me some backstory about where her head was at so that I could embody that in a way that was really representative of like her history. And so for the most part, she let me just play and do my own thing and build Ella for myself. But when she felt like she had to step in and give me more specificity, she was there to do that.
Yeah. And obviously, at the point when we meet Ella in the show, she's going through a little bit of almost a rediscovery of herself because she's figuring out who she's been already as a storyteller and as a writer and who it is that she wants to be and but also what she has to do in order to survive. There's the personal element of her relationship with Anderson coming back together, but it doesn't feel like things are falling apart around her. It just feels like she had everything on track and she actually had everything in place, and then things that were completely out of her control fell apart a little bit, and she's figuring out how to piece those elements back together. And so within that, was it something that was important to you and Lee, or did you talk about it at all in the necessity to play her as a character who has it together and not someone who, because they lost certain things in their life or they're not going as they want, things are falling apart around them to a huge degree?
Lee, when I first auditioned for the show, the character was described as a beautiful mess. And so there really wasn't this idea that she has everything together. I think the idea was that, maybe on the surface, looking at her, everything is together. And I think that's something that you kind of see reflected in all of the women, is that they're on the surface, it looks like everything is okay. But when you really get into the meat of it, you start to see all of these little cracks that they're trying to heal. And so Ella, I think is probably the most, she's probably struggling the most in terms of, just not really feeling like she has a footing on her life. And I think that's really where the story comes in for her, is that she's just figuring it all out. And for me in my creative process, I recently went through an experience where I was on a show, I was on NCIS Los Angeles, and people loved my character. And I was like, okay, this is way bigger than I thought it was going to be. I had gone in for a one-day guest star, and then I ended up doing an entire season. And I was just like, oh my God, this is going to be my big break. Like, this is it. Like, I'm going to be famous. I'm going to be doing multiple seasons. I'm going to be an action star. I had all of these ideas of what was going to come out of that experience. And then it was not that experience for me at all. Like, I had a great experience on the show, but it was also a very difficult experience on the show. And then my character ended up getting killed off. And then I was unemployed for like 2 years. And so during that period, I fell into depression and disillusionment, and I was frustrated and confused and just going through all of these conflicting emotions of not really feeling like the path that I was on was coming into fruition the way that I imagined, which is like something I think a lot of people experience. And so I really just got to embody all of those feelings through the eyes of Ella, because we all go through those same things. The mechanism might be a little bit different, but ultimately that core experience is the same thing of just, wow, I just woke up and my life is completely different from how I thought it could be. This is very painful. I don't know what to do. How do I move through this? And so that really was a cathartic experience for me as an actor, to get to go back and say, okay, I've moved through this as Andrea, but how do I get to recreate or retell the story through Ella?
Yeah. And I also think that as an actor, with everything that you were just describing, there's so frequently that course of you just never know where a trajectory is really going to take you. And I love the story of how you ended up being cast on the show, that it was actually auditioning for something else with Kim Coleman,
Yeah.
who then introduced you to the producers. And does an experience like that change the way in which you think about walking into auditions and walking into the room? Because and even the NCIS experience where you ended up with a much bigger role than you thought you were going to get, do you find that there's just like a necessity of a real openness for wherever a journey might take you that you have to constantly hold on to as an actor with so much
Yes.
uncertainty?
Yes. Openness is the key. And that's what is, that's what exists in both of those experiences for me. When I got the audition for the NCIS LA role, I remember I was having lunch with my boyfriend at the time, and it was a 1 day guest star role. And at that point, I had done a number of guest stars, I had done a bunch of co-stars, and I really wanted that upgrade. I really wanted to get to that next rung of the ladder. And I remember seeing the audition and just feeling so bitter. I was so bitter about it. I was just like, another 1 day guest star? How many more of these do I have to do before I get the opportunity to do something bigger? And I remember my boyfriend just being like, babe, you haven't really been auditioning that much. It's been a bit of a slow summer. Just go in for it. Just have fun. Like, you don't even have to take the role if you don't want it, but just go in and have fun with it. And I said, okay, fine. Of course you're still kind of a little annoyed by it, but he was right. And I went into that audition with just like an open mind, and just, the idea that I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to play for 5 minutes in front of a room full of people and see what happens. And my willingness to be open is what led me to doing a full season arc on the show and getting the upgrade that I had been desiring, that I felt like I wasn't getting simply by it being a 1 day guest star. And it's the same with my experience with Run the World and Kim Coleman. I was called in for a role that normally I would have said no. Like I say no to auditions all the time, and for various different reasons. And for this particular one, my first instinct was to say no. But because of my journey of working with a life coach and just healing and doing shadow work and really just eliminating all of the limitations that I was putting on myself because of my, traumas, I decided, you know what, I'm going to go in for this. I'm going to go in. And even though it's not something that I would do, I'm going to break this down, and I'm going to take this writing and I'm going to elevate it in a way that they never imagined. And then I ended up getting pinned for the role. And then I didn't get it. But then, like you said, was sent straight to producers for Run the World. And I just don't believe that I would have even gotten the opportunity to audition for Run the World had I not kept my heart open to the possibility of something different. And that's what I love expressing to actors, especially younger actors or actors who are trying to like get over that hump, is you have to stay open. Even if it's something that you wouldn't necessarily do, just going in the room and playing in that space is enough to send a message to the universe that you're calling in something else for yourself. And so I just love those stories that I've gotten to experience through, that openness.
Yeah, and I think it's really wonderful the way that you're exploring Ella as a character and as a writer and as a storyteller from everything that you were saying about pulling your own experience in. And how in depth did you want to get in terms of thinking about, who is she as a writer, what's her voice, what's kind of her style and approach, and what are the moments that inspire her, what's her process throughout the day, or was it something where you didn't need to get quite as detailed because so many details of that were on the page of the script already?
I think it's a little bit of both. Well, it's actually mostly the latter. So many of those details were already present on the page, but I also feel like so much of that already lives within me because I'm so much like Ella in many, many ways. I don't necessarily make the same choices that she makes, but the overall uh like mental state that she's in and just like her perspectives on life very much resonate with me. I am someone who really I love to write about, women's empowerment and women's issues. And I haven't published anything publicly yet, but that's something that's very, very passionate to me. And so even just in terms of figuring out, okay, what's my voice as a woman who's expressing my truth, and how is this resonating with others, and just the fear of your voice not being heard in the way that you imagine it would. And that's something that we get to see Ella experience throughout the season when she puts out her book and you see the flashbacks of how the book was received. For her, she thought that she was evolving. She thought that she was sharing something really truthful and intimate about herself, but it wasn't really resonating with her audience. And so even for me, I've had experiences where you express yourself in a way that feels so grounded, but it doesn't resonate, it doesn't impact in the way that you thought it would, and that could be very hurtful. And so while most of the things that were necessary for this were already on the page, there was an element of me really just tapping into my own desires, my own secret desires, and getting to, portray those through the lens of Ella.
And one of the details that ended up being a facet of her as a character and a plot point that was a slightly different trajectory that I loved learning about was the karaoke scene, coming from you talking about your love of karaoke, but
Yeah.
also the specificity that you love doing private room karaoke where it's just you and your friends and no one else has to see you. Um, which is very different to then filming a karaoke scene in a television show that everybody is getting to watch. And so, was
Yeah.
there a little bit of fear in approaching that scene? And if so, what was your process of really overcoming it in the moment when you were actually filming that scene? Because it's so brilliant in all of the different trajectories that you take your character on throughout the arc of the evening, and even just the levels of drunkenness that she is at different points.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so happy you noticed that. Yeah, that scene was the scariest scene for me the entire season for all of the reasons that you just illustrated. For me, I remember when I got the episodes, because we pretty much got all of the episodes at once, which was really lovely because we got to read the entire trajectory of the season all within like a span of a few days. And when I saw episode 3, and then like in the very first scene, the guys at the bar mentioned karaoke, I remember my heart just like dropping into my stomach. I was like, oh my God, we're doing karaoke. And it was because I knew that it's not about, even though it's in a private setting, it's for a television show. It's on a set with, 50 plus people. It's going to be broadcast to millions of people. And then I remember getting to the third act of the show when Ella's doing Alanis Morissette. I was like, wait, so not only am I doing karaoke, I have to do the iconic Alanis Morissette. Are you kidding me? And so what I really did was I just had to meditate on it. I had to meditate, and I had to remind myself that, number one, this is being manifested for me so that I can conquer this fear. And that's one of the things that I love about being an actor, is because we get to explore so many of our shadows through the medium of the craft. And so for me, this was a great opportunity to grow myself as Andrea through this really heartbreaking experience that Ella's having. And so for me, there was a lot of meditation, a lot of breath work, just reminding myself that I'm safe, I'm supported, that every single person that is, on set wants me to my best. And honestly, the more bad I am, the funnier it is. And that was something that I had to really connect to in terms of the comedy, is that, me kind of making a fool of myself, that's where the comedy happens. That's something that's like, really, it's the tragedy that makes comedy so enticing for people. It's like, wow, this is really cringe and really embarrassing, but it's so real because she's just feeling all of the emotions and letting those come through. And one of the specific things that I did in my process, especially when it came to filming the actual performance of Alanis, was that the night before, I did not know what I was going to do. I didn't know how I was going to get into that emotional space. I was a little bit stressed out about it. I was still pretty nervous about singing in front of everybody because that's a thing for me. It's just embarrassing. And I just asked God, I asked the universe, I said, I need the thing that's going to allow me to tap into this emotionally. And what I did was, and I don't necessarily recommend this for everyone, but for me, I had the conscious awareness to do this. I decided to go and look on my ex-boyfriend's Instagram page, which is not something that I do. And I went and I looked on his Instagram page, and I think like maybe a week or two before, he had posted a photo with him and his girlfriend that I didn't know he had. And so I remember kind of like feeling my heart sink a little bit. And then I realized, wow, this is the gift that you asked for. This is what you need. This is the substitution for this scene that will allow you to connect to what it is Ella is experiencing in this moment. And it was so perfect with the song being what it was. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on the name of the song. You ought to know.
You want to know.
It was just so perfect because the song is about, her love, basically like leaving her, like being with another woman, even though he promised her that she was the one forever. And so it was just so divine the way that it happened. And so I took that little sinking feeling of heartbreak and I interwove that into that scene. And so when I'm sitting there looking all pathetic and despondent and I'm like singing my heart out and just being ridiculous, I'm just playing on the emotions that I was able to call in the night before when I went on this Instagram page. And so it was just, there was so much catharsis and therapy and healing that came from me getting the chance to do that. And then seeing how everyone really just loved that scene so much was also very, very healing for me as an individual, not just as an actor, because by tapping into that and conquering that fear, I got to show a completely different side of myself and also heal parts of myself that needed healing.
Yeah.
I know that was like really long, but
No, I absolutely love it because it's one of my favorite scenes, and it's one of the ones that whenever you're just kind of replaying the show in your mind, it always jumps out immediately.
thank
Um,
you.
one of the other things that I wanted to ask about when it comes to the group dynamic is the way in which they deal with conflict, because I love the fact that even when there's conflict and they're butting heads with each other, that they're still always communicating and everything still comes from such a place of love and friendship. And was that something that was a conscious effort for everybody, that you were all thinking about that, or was it just naturally part of the dynamic within the group that was already created for you all?
I think it was naturally part of the dynamic, but I also think it speaks to just, Lee's writing on the show. And of course, Yvette Lee Bowser's, development as the showrunner in terms of really solidifying these friendships as something that are enviable. I mean, that's one of the things that Yvette always says. She calls it enviable female friendships. And it's enviable in the sense, like what you said, is that you can have a core group of your best girls around you. That doesn't mean that there isn't going to be conflict. What really solidifies and strengthens that friendship is the way in which you handle that conflict. And I think that's what's so beautifully illustrated on the show. I mean, like I said, the four of us, we're all drastically different. None of us, like, we have some things in common, but we are so completely different in almost every way, in terms of the way that we see the world, the way we express ourselves, the way that we dress, our personal interests. They're all so drastically different. And so with that, there's a magnetic attraction that happens, but then there can also be conflict because of that. I haven't really experienced any conflict with the women yet. It's not to say that we won't. And if we do, we're human and that's just natural. But the way that it carries through the characters is that, it's those differences that we love about each other, because you being different from me and having a different perspective allows you to see a side of me that maybe I don't recognize in myself. And you get to give voice to that. And that's really what I think is one of the main purposes of friendship, is to be mirrors to each other so that you can help grow each other into the best versions of yourselves. And so with the show and the way that it's written, like we're always kind of like calling each other out on things. And like sometimes there's a little sarcasm, but sometimes it's very direct. And then what's even better that I love that's illustrated is that we don't use each other as, sounding boards for all of our problems. We understand that there's an element of like professional help that needs to be brought in as well, which is why all the women go to therapy. And then they go there to like really get to the root of the things that are bothering them, so that they're not projecting those things onto their friends. Or if they are projecting those things onto their friends, they're able to pull back and see, wait a second, this isn't about Ella not backing me up. This is about me, creating this story in my head that I'm now pushing onto her and causing conflict. So let me pull the reins back on that so that I can maintain symbiosis in the friendship. And I just think, yeah, I really do think that it's mostly just the writing, and then the fact that we are just really well cast on the show.
Well, I think that everything that you just described is exactly why the dynamic and the friendship on the show works so well, and why it's really resonated with every person that's watched it. And thank you so much, Andrea.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was so fun because I haven't gotten to talk a lot about the process as much with all of the press. So it was really fun to kind of like even just figure out, what is it that I know about this process?